Good morning, sunshines. All right, so hopefully you completed, you're turning in your analysis of Krapp's last tape. Again, this is your analysis. I may have suggested several options or opportunities for interpretation, but ultimately it's your choice as to what the answers to those questions are. You just need to send that to me. There's no right or wrong. Just looking for you to answer the questions about the given circumstances as you see them. The characters, obviously there's the one character that's there, but there's the other characters that are mentioned in the course of the play. Who are they? What is their relation to Krapp, etc. So you just want the moods, the atmospheres, anything, whatever it is that you interpret. Again, what words you understand are maybe different than the words that I understand. Vaduity, if you know what it means, great. If you don't know what it means, you need to put it on the list of things you don't understand what they mean. So anyway, so that needs to come here. And then, of course, hopefully you've just watched the video, which is, again, one of several interpretations on the internet that you could watch. Again, it just should be interesting, hopefully, for you to see the difference between the interpretation they use in the video versus the way you saw the play when you read it and as you analyzed it, yes? So hopefully that's what that's all about. Again, one of the things we talked about the other day were the 5 elements of the theater. You have the script, in this case, Krapp's last tape, and we're about to start working on Crimes of the Heart. But you have the script, you have the theater that you're going to be working in. Again, for the purposes of our play or this class, the theater may be the classroom. You may plan for it to be, I'll plan for it to be, the ground plan will be used for the theater at AUM. Obviously, if you were going to use some other space, you're welcome to it. It's all theoretical anyway. But again, the ground plan I'm going to send you in a few weeks will be based on AUM. You have the actor, yes? So again, in your head, if you want to try and cast the show, as a part of Krapp's last tape, you may have mentioned people you think may have been able to play Krapp that you know, or that famous actors, etc. For Crimes of the Heart, you may go ahead and cast people that we know here, or just famous movie stars, etc. Just come up with a cast for the show, and then of course the purpose of this play is for educational purposes. So that's what we're using the play for, is to educate you as to how to direct a play, which again, in performance is quite different. So you have to understand, even though we're going through the analysis phase, we're going through the various sundry ways of approaching a play and attacking a play, all of it, because it's ultimately educational, is theoretical. So when you go to actual production, one of the things about a director's role, and I'll mention this many times, is that whatever the questions are in the play, if you're just reading a play, you can have questions, you can have doubts, you can have things that don't make sense. I'm going to say the greatest play ever written, and by many people's standards, the greatest movie ever made, have huge plot points. Yes? If you're doing a production of Hamlet, one of the problems with Hamlet is that the uncle kills Hamlet's father, who is king. So why is the uncle now king? And no monarchy ever established does it transition to the brother with a son who is of age. Yes, the son should be the monarch, which is a huge plot point in Hamlet. Hamlet should be the king. Why isn't Hamlet the king? They don't deal with it at all. They totally gloss it over. One of the greatest movies ever made, Citizen Kane. They keep talking about Rosebud. Except the only time he mentions it is on his deathbed, and he is alone in the room, and after he drops the globe, then the nurse comes in because she hears the snow globe fall, and he has already said the word Rosebud. And he doesn't scream it, he whispers it. And so the whole point is to find out what Rosebud is, only nobody heard it. Huge plot point, yes? Now, how do you deal with that? Well, you can create some sort of rationale for it. Yes, maybe Hamlet's mother is the queen, and so the lineage passes through the queen in this instance. In which case, he should be called the prince. Like Prince Philip is the prince. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. But as you're going to deal with each play, you're going to find problems in the play because no play is real. They're all fictitious. They're all made up, and there are stories that are going to have holes in them, and finding ways to fill in the holes, or to gloss over the holes, or to ignore the holes. So whatever choices you're going to make, you're going to have to find the answer to those. So that's where this whole analysis phase comes in, and dealing with the play in practical terms. Yes. We talked about the flow chart of who is involved in the production. The director's job is to interpret the play. That is your job. As a director, you are there to take the play from the page to the stage and provide guidance to those who are your actors, who are your designers, etc., on how you're going to present this play in reality versus how it is written. Yes? Again, we're going to talk a little bit more about concept and style in a couple of days, but the concept is the way you're going to actually perform the play. The style is the way the play was intended to be performed. Hopefully those two are not too distant. However, for instance, Shakespeare was written to be performed in an outdoor theater in the middle of the day. Yes, in Elizabethan England. And oftentimes, for instance, today, Shakespeare is set in modern times or in the Wild West. Of course, Shakespeare didn't know anything about the Wild West. It was, 300 years in the future. How could he have known anything about the Wild West? But that doesn't mean it can't still work in the Wild West. One of the best productions of Taming the Shrew I ever saw was set in the Wild Wild West. And so that's part of the interpretation of the conceptualization of the play. Yes? And as a director, it's your job to decipher that and come up with those images and come up with those clues. Of course, you're going to use the help of your design team, and you're going to have the actors who are going to bring in their own life experience. And so that is called collaboration, working together. That is what makes theater different than any other art form. Now, it is helpful for you to be the smartest man or person in the room so that you can identify a good idea versus a bad idea, but you can rely on other people to do the work for you, right? We talk about a little bit the integrity of the show, yes? Oftentimes, it may not be the director who brings the integrity to the show. It could be the design team that brings the integrity. But good shows tend to have integrity. In other words, they have this sense of experience of people researching and putting hard work into the conceptualization of the show. And sometimes, hopefully, that comes from you as a director. But occasionally, good shows just have that integrity because of the design team or because of the actors involved, etc. Hopefully, though, that is something that you have helped to guide and you have helped to nurture. Now, a producer is the person that initially is going to do the hiring, and you'll have people who are producers who are active, and you'll have producers who will care less. In Amadeus, the king is the producer, and he comes in at one point, and they have cut the music to the ballet because the king has decreed there's not going to be any ballet. And so the composer has taken the music out and just have people dancing around. But because the king has outlawed ballet, they just move without any music. And so the producer comes in, the king comes in and says, what's going on? This is silly. And so he then adds it back in, yes? And so I would say he's a hands-off producer, but they're gonna have opinions when they show up, yes? You also have producers who are very much involved, especially I have found if you're a young director or somebody who's new to the directing scene and the producer may not entirely trust what you're going to do, the producer may be a little bit more hands-on. Come to rehearsals a little earlier in the process, maybe give you a few more notes than someone that they trust or that has a reputation behind them, yes. So just be prepared. The producer may have a huge impact over the way the show is interpreted. Obviously, the biggest impact they have is they have the purse strings, yes? And so while, again, one of the things you have to work with is people, but one of the things you have to work with is budgets. And if suddenly the theater experiences some sort of financial burden that they didn't have before, you may be mid-process come to and said, listen, I told you we had this kind of money for budget, but we no longer have that, you need to cut back, which would have been helpful to know to begin with. You may have made some different choices if you knew you were only going to have $1,000 versus $10,000, yes, as far as your expenditures, but you have to deal with the way you have to deal with, yes. But the producer is there to provide the monetary fund and support. And if you need additional people like spotlight operators, etc., oftentimes the producer is the one you go to ask for more funds or that sort of thing to find the money to have those additional crew members that you may need, dressers, whatever it is, additional actors. Let's say you decided that that having 2 people is not necessarily enough to make an army, and you suddenly need an army, etc. The stage manager, real quick, is going to be your right-hand person. They're the ones that are going to technically be calling the rehearsals. They're the ones that are going to make sure people are on time. They're going to make sure that people are off book. They're going to be the people that are going to call the show once the show is up and running and keeping it the way that you have intended for the play to be performed. So having a good working relation with the stage manager is imperative. Having a good stage manager is imperative. The other person that, again, initially, we haven't got to the auditions yet, we're talking, of course, the cast is going to become very important. But initially, the technical director is going to be somebody you're going to need to have a good working relationship with, because they tend to be the person who the producer has left in charge of the budget, and they also tend to be in charge of the budget of people as well. Because again, most producers are not there on a day-to-day basis, but you're going to have to deal with a technical director in those areas, yes? And so those are the more important people initially. Again, one of the things we're going to talk about the next few days is dealing with designers, and then of course ultimately dealing with actors. You're going to spend a whole lot of time dealing with actors. But initially, again, you're going to deal with those people just in the overall conceptualization of how much time, much money, how much, which direction are we headed with this production? Yes. I'm going to give you the 4 main drives of a director, right? These are the 4 things that really make for a director as opposed to an actor or a designer. First of all, the director is the person who has to have the vision for the play. As you're reading the play, you have to be really good at coming up with a visual idea of what's going on as you see the scene being played out. Now again, you don't have to answer the questions in your visual scene of what the color of the drapes are, or what color the walls are, or what kind of silverware they have, etc., if they're having dinner, etc. But you just need to have a way of understanding the play physically, because eventually this piece of paper that is just words on a page is going to have to be conceptualized into a production in reality. Yes, and so the quicker you can have a vision of the way you see the play being produced, the better it is going to be for you to communicate that to help guide your design team. Now, again, your guidance may vary depending upon the situation that you're in. If you're working at a community theater with designers who are very young or inexperienced, it may be that you have to give a little bit more guidance to them. If you're working at a professional theater like the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, those designers are going to come in well researched and well prepared to discuss the various aspects of the play as well. And so, in collaboration with those people, you should be prepared to develop your vision for the play. But don't discount their input just because you may have had a different vision. Listen and decide. Sometimes the direction is between A and B, or to create a C. And as the lighting designer and as the costume designer add their little, you may move things a little bit more right or left or different, but ultimately you're the person who's going to have the vision for what the story is that you're telling. Yes? And it is imperative that everyone is on the same page and telling the same story. Yes? Bad productions come out of everybody thinking they're the most important. If you're having a dinner and you're deciding on what the dinner's going to be, you're going to have the entree, you're going to have the salad, you're going to have the wine, you're going to have the dessert. If every one of those people is doing their best, you're going to have a dinner that's complete, well organized, proportionate, right? So that you're not having a 22-ounce steak and a 7-layer chocolate cake, which makes it impossible to eat. You're going to have proportionate pieces that are appropriate for the meal. You're going to have the set design doing the amount of work that it needs to do, the costumes need to do the amount of work. I mean, for instance, some shows are about spectacle, right? Cats is about spectacle. Trust me. There is no underlying hidden meaning about cats. Cats is not some, deep, incredibly psychological nature of cats and how it relates to mankind. It is a story about cats and how cute they are. Costumes have got to be impeccable. The designs, the lights, the set have got to be visually stunning, or else and of course the singing has got to be pristine, or the audience is gonna leave at intermission. Yes. So again, some shows the set or the costumes, and Peter Pan, you got to fly. What is the most important thing about the show, right? Different shows. In Titanic, the boat's got to sink. You got a great show every other way, the sinking sucks. The show fails, right? I don't know if you know Titanic, but at the end of Titanic, the boat goes down on stage. How are you going to do that, right? And so you have to find the answers for the things that are the most important, and those things win. If Peter Pan doesn't fly, Peter Pan fails. Yes? They have a whole song called Flying. And if they're just standing on the ground, it may have a different comedic effect that you may not hopefully be a part of the play as written. Yes? And so you have to have a vision for what is the most important thing or aspect of the play. Yes? You have to have a comprehensive knowledge. As you go through the script, every single thing that's going to be performed in that play, the question's got to be asked, what does this have to do with the story? And you have to understand what the impact is going to be. What are things that you need to slow down for and speak coherently to the audience so that they understand the information they're getting, so that they can understand the rest of the play, and what can we speak through? What can we get through quickly so the audience stays awake, so we get the information out quickly, and what do we need to slow down for and say to be or not to be? That is the question. And if that speech is just rambled through and just glossed over, I'm gonna say Hamlet's gonna suffer. Then they're gonna start noticing that the king shouldn't be the king. Because you've lost the soliloquies, you've lost the inner monologues, yes? Which I would say in Hamlet are the more important things that you hear. So the rest of it can just be glossed over because you don't want them to realize the king shouldn't be the king. Let's get through all this stuff so we can get to the inner turmoil of should I kill my daddy, which is what it's about, yes? Well, let's talk about this, a beat. One of the first things you have to be able to understand is the idea of a beat of information, a little packet of information. For instance, we just talked about a comprehensive knowledge, and if you replay the video, I had a rhythm and a pace, and when I started talking about Hamlet, I changed. Yes, my rhythm, my pace changed. The Hamlet beat was a subset of the larger comprehensive knowledge beat. We're talking about beats right now, and the beat of Hamlet, of talking about beats, we've reviewed the beat on comprehensive knowledge, and we reviewed the beat on Hamlet. So as you're doing the play, there are going to be large beats, like for instance, a dance, a fight, a dinner, right? That's the large. What are we doing in this section of the play? We're having dinner. We're at a bar having drinks, right? That's the big beat. But within that beat, you're going to have times when they talk about sports on TV, or you're going to have times when they talk about ordering another beer. And each of those beats becomes a separate and significantly different action. You can only play one beat at a time. If you're having the beat about sports and suddenly you want to order another beer, you have to break whatever it is, the focus, the rhythm, the attention. If we're talking about a football game and we've got this imaginary TV up there and we're focused on the TV, we want to order another beer, we have to change our focus to the bartender and change our attitude. Hey, we get louder. We start changing our gesture because we've gone from talking about sports to talking about ordering a beer. Yes? And then, but the overall beat is still just two friends getting back together after not seen each other in 20 years, let's say, at a bar. Okay? And they're avoiding talking about the things they don't want to talk about by talking about sports and by talking about beer. Right? And so you have the overall beat, and then you have the beats within the larger beats, right? Each beat is gonna have its own objective, it's gonna have its own rhythm, it's gonna have its own pace. So that's why it's important to identify. What I usually do when I score a script, I'll go through and I will take a marker and a pencil. And where you have a small beat, I'll put a line for a pencil. But where there's a huge beat shift, and oftentimes the big beats will change when you introduce a new character. A French scene is in France in the neoclassic age. Anytime a new character come on, the scene would shift. Or anytime a character would leave, the scene would shift. And so those were called French scenes. It is also true today that as you are going through your script, anytime a new character is introduced, oftentimes the beats will change because you have to introduce that new character into what's going on. Now, let's say you're having a reunion. We've got our bar scene with our reunion of people that haven't seen each other in several years, right? And you add a third person who was a part of that group. The overall beat may not change, but the internal beat's gonna change because you're gonna have a new person you have to say hello to, how you doing? You know, we're watching this game, you want a beer? You know, everything changes once you add another person, and when another person comes in, the beat changes. When a person leaves, the beat changes. You start talking about that person or not, right? And again, when somebody leaves and you don't talk about them, that's saying something about that person, right? So again, just hopefully we'll talk about beats many more times in the next couple weeks, but just to understand that a beat is the smallest packet of information, like the molecule, yes? If you're talking about atoms. It's like the smallest atom or the smallest molecule of the play, yes? And overall, you're going to hopefully have enough rhythms. You don't want every rhythm to be, if you ever watched The Godfather, Al Pacino, one of the great things that he does, the character of Michael Corleone, could yell every single line he has. Every single line he has, he's mad at somebody. There's never a scene when he's not mad. Even when he's in love with his wife, he's still mad at her. But Al Pacino very precisely picks the points where he loses his temper and yells. And the fun thing is, those 3 or 4 times that he does in the movie are the climactic moments and are the lines that you remember from the film, yes? So he was very good at going through and identifying, yes, where the peaks and the valleys are, right? You can't play screaming all the time, you can't play quiet all the time. You gotta find your highs and your lows, your rhythms, your beats, yes? So that's what that is. Skills as a communicator. When can well, first of all, you need to know how to put people on stage so that they don't cover each other. The audience should be able to see, I'm gonna call it picturization, but the audience should be able to see through the course of the play anybody on the stage so that they can figure out who's doing what. Oftentimes, I would say 90% of the time, the person you want to look at is the person who's speaking. But occasionally you want to look at the person who's being spoken about, yes? Oftentimes that person can be just as interesting, if not more interesting, to what's going on, yes? And again, the way you stage the show, the way you put people on stage, have people who should be the focus in the power positions. We're going to talk about power positions, but typically downstage center is the power position, especially if they're facing downstage. If you have somebody if you're doing Death of a Salesman, for instance, and you have Willie Loman, who the play is about, in the power position to begin the play, down center, but you have him facing upstage, which is the weakest way to face, you have done exactly what Death of a Salesman is. You've got a person who we're telling the story about, the lead character, the protagonist of the play, and what the play is about is his weakness. So you put him down center and you put him in a strong position, but you give him the weakest attitude within that position, yes? So as you have to have just a way of communicating and understanding the way you stage a show, that again, you'll get better with over time. Having recurring placement on the stage. In La Traviata, for instance, I'm gonna pick down right just because it's a power position. Let's say the place where they fall in love, not just La Traviata, but just any play where 2 people fall in love, let's say it's down right. Let's say at the end of the play they die, one of them dies. Romeo and Juliet, that makes it easy. If they also die in the same position, you have a connection to the place where they fell in love and the place they died. That becomes their position. For those of you who were in production, we just did of The Seagull. The Seagull had a place on stage when she was the Seagull that she returned to every time she was the Seagull. Yes, now I don't know if the actress knew, but as a director I knew, and again, I don't know if the audience could have articulated that, but it became just a repetitive place for every time she talked about being the Seagull, being in the exact same place. So repetition can become, we'll talk more about this, but repetition can become a very important part, a very important skill to learn as a communicator, yes. The fourth drive is a strong desire to entertain. You really have to love what you're doing, yes. Love theater. You have to love going to theater, love going and watching movies. And not only for the entertainment value of it, but for analyzing it and for understanding how the story is being told. It will enrich the way that you are able to tell stories, and as with anything, you can then hearken back or refer to other works. Yes, they're just ways that people shape themselves, the way they use their gestures, that you can then use in other situations that are similar to that. I'm gonna use my cousin Vinny, just because I love it, as an example. Marissa Tomei, when she's pregnant and she's pounding her foot on the floor, yes, that is a visual image that anybody who's seen the movie knows. And if you have the same situation in a play, it is nice to maybe have just that moment where somebody's pounding their foot to get attention that will remind people of the quality of that performance in My Cousin Vinny, yes? And that's just an example. There are many great examples over history of great performances that, you know, Stella, Yellow Stella, etc. So it gives you a way to reference other materials, and the more you know, the more you can bring into your visual information, the better you are, and the more exciting life will be, and the more interesting your character, your actors will be in performing for you. Let's see here, don't be afraid to fail. Especially in rehearsal. Encourage people to experiment until you start getting things once you get into tech rehearsal, things need to start solidifying as far as pacing, rhythms, etc. But until then, if you're, especially when the most powerful time in a play, and unfortunately usually the shortest period of time in rehearsal, is the time the actor is off book, and between the time they're off book and the time of the first tech. Hopefully they're off book before the first tech. There you go. Hopefully they're off book before the opening night. But really, that's where the work can happen. If the actor has the script in their pocket, or on their hands, even worse, they don't feel free to explore the character or the options. But once you have got to get the actors, even if it means just doing a line through, just to get the actors off book, you've got to get past the point of to the point of polishing the show, where you get the people off the book. And during that period of time, you can do a lot of work by experimenting, changing actors, flipping roles. Just try for a moment being the other character and seeing through the other character's eyes the same scene will help an actor to understand what it is that they're trying to do in the scene, and see how the other actor is manipulating them in the scene. Does that make sense? Or ways they can be manipulated. So again, those are just a couple of examples. But don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to fail. You fail, you fail. Yes, but a lot of the time those can lead to the answers. It's just like questions. Don't be afraid to ask. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Dumb questions lead to good questions. Yes, and so question everything, right? Hopefully there's an answer. And as a director, you've got to be the person to find the answer. And it's okay to say I don't know. Be honest with yourself, right? Don't just force an answer because it's your job to have the answer, right? But ultimately, the buck is going to stop with you. I've got a little video. Cody, you got want to look at the time here? I've got a little video for the importance of the playwright for those of you who might be working with original scripts, because it is a little different. And here's a nice little succinct video about working with playwrights.
On behalf of TVLessonDotCom, my name is Joseph Adler, and I'm producing artistic director of Gable Stage in Coral Gables, Florida. Let's talk a little bit about the approach to the play. Now, in theater, I think the playwright is supreme. Now, we always hear talk about how important the director is in film. And certainly that's true. I'm not saying a director isn't really important when it comes to theater, but in theater, a playwright is protected in so many ways that most film writers do not have the protection, at least until they become well-known names and can ask for that protection contractually. Every playwright has the right to approve of any changes that are made. And many of them are very willing to make those changes, and many others are intransigent when you start to discuss them. So in any case, when it comes to approaching the work, the most fundamental thing is to try to find out what this play is really about. And when you figure that out, you know, from that material comes the approach. I think form definitely has to grow out of content. Style has to evolve from the content of the play. If you impose your own style on something and it isn't really right, you're definitely going to have problems. I think so often we put a mirror in front of ourselves, and instead of seeing what it is we're doing, we're really looking at ourselves and trying to impose whatever it is we would like to be doing with this material on material that it is not necessarily suited for. So the play comes first. I think that's true, of course, for the actors. Everything they need to know is somewhere in that play, one hopes. The quest for that and for the meaning and interpretation of that meaning is what this craft is all about. But first comes the word, and the word is supreme. It's one of the many things I love about theater. That's pretty much how I feel about what comes first. On behalf of TVLessonDotCom, I'm Joseph Adler. Thank you for watching.
All right, so again, some good advice about working with playwrights. A little different because you have this other voice to work with who might be there. I would say 90% of the time, 99% of the time, you're not working with a playwright. One of the things about AUM is because we encourage playwrights, we quite often, I would say, you know, once every other season, if not more than that, have an original play, especially now that Neil David has been working with Hollins College, Hollins University. We quite often will do an original script. And so it's just it's a different way of approaching a play because nobody's ever done it before. It's brand new. And so you've got to find new answers that nobody else has ever discovered before. Yes? All right, let's just talk about great productions. Great productions, which ultimately, it seems to me, should be your goal as a director. The first thing about great productions, again, it's from your book. There's what is it, seven different things. The first thing is integrity. Again, I'm going to say what your book means by integrity is that everything is in its place. Every entrance is on cue. All the lines have a rhythm and a pace. There's never a point where it's too loud or too soft, or you don't hear the dialogue. You always know what's going on. There's just an integrity to the piece, which fits very nicely with the next word, which is elegance. There's no effort to the play. People who are elegant, you don't have to wear the finest clothes, you don't have to wear the sharpest outfit. It's just that you feel comfortable in the clothes that you wear, right? You shouldn't have a person who, again, I'm going to use this example, but I think I talked to you about the other day, but I'll mention it here. I tend not to cast non-smokers in smoking roles because there's just a way that a person who smokes holds a cigarette. And not all of them are the same, but there's just a comfort that they have. It's an elegance that they have with a cigarette or a cigar, the smoker, if they haven't smoked cigars, that you can't get over 6 weeks, right? There's just an attitude, the way they hold themselves, that is just different. And so again, an integrity, but also an elegance, an inevitability. You should feel as you're watching the play as an audience that everything that is happening, at the rhythm, the pace, the scene changes, the costume changes, everything is working in a rhythm that is appropriate. Again, I'm not saying it's always the same rhythm. Could be times when it speeds up or slows down, but it always seems inevitable. You can't imagine, if you sit through a play and say, you know what, I can't imagine that play being done any other way. That's a play that has inevitability. And that's what makes a great piece of theater. Uniqueness, having things done. For instance, what's the musical where they're underground in hell, Hades Town, maybe is the name of it. There's a sequence where they bring down these lights and they have a dance with these lights where they bring them back and forth. Anybody in the history of the world could have done this, but it's the first time it was ever done. It sticks with you. It's just something that nobody's ever seen before. Now, again, these uniquenesses need to come from the play and from the experience. You shouldn't just put that in because that's a fun thing, yes? But you'll find through the course of a play, there are choices that you can make that will help make the play a unique experience for the actors and for the audience as well, yes? It should be compelling, it should be engaging, it should be something that is riveting. A good play, I sat through a production of Nicholas Nickleby that's 8 hours in length. It seemed like 8 seconds. It was just amazing how fresh and new and involved you became as an audience in this production. And at the end of the day, you were like, oh my God, I just spent 8 hours in here. I've also seen 20-minute plays that I thought were an hour and a half because they were so ill-paced and so ill-conceived. Yes, and so it can work the opposite way as well. But compelling play is something that is very moving to the person. It should be something that, and again, this is really easy in retrospect. If you can, 3 or 4 days later, remember the play or aspects of the play, it has a reverberation to it, right? It sticks in your craw, it sticks in your memory. That was a great play. Yes, if 3 or 4 days later, for instance, I often will ask my lovely wife what we had for dinner the other day, because 9 times out of 10 we're just eating to eat. But there are the meals that you have that are just special. You can remember 10 years later, what you had and who the people were, etc. So those are plays that have reverberation. And the last thing, again, this is very hard to define, but it's just beauty. I'm not saying it is beautiful, but it is just a beautiful thing to watch, right? To see the play happen, to see it has a uniqueness, it has a reverberation, it has a quality. It is a beautiful thing to watch. It brings a tear to your eye to watch. Yes, that's a great play. And again, as a director, those are reactions and experiences that you should strive to have and to put into the play. Now, is it necessarily going to be better than the Broadway version? No, of course. Broadway actors are Broadway actors. They're trained professionals. But you can have those experiences at the level and the quality of the play you're going to do. If you have a college play, you have a community theater play, you have a play at Alabama Shakespeare Festival, there should be a uniqueness, a quality about it that is memorable. Yes, to make it out, that's what makes it a great play. All right. Elements, what you can work with. Obviously the script, the source material, which is where you're going to get you've done your analysis for, etc. The next thing you're going to talk about is the ground plan, which is going to be your form to your play. The script is your content, yes? The design is the form. Obviously, let's see if I can put it in terms that aren't too, if you're having a glass of wine, there's a reason that a wine glass looks like a wine glass. It's because wine wants to be savored and you want to enjoy the smell and the aroma of it. And so that's why you have that tulip cup on the top of a wine glass. 1, so you can hold the stem, so you're not heating the wine. And then 2, so you can get the aroma of the wine. So the form of the wine glass holds the content of the wine and they work together. Yes? Now, if you put milk in a wine glass, it just feels wrong. There are glasses you put milk in, right? And so just because you may have a great concept for a play, again, that's forcing, if you want to set Death of a Salesman in the Wild Wild West, I don't know, I'm just going with crazy stuff. It seems like putting milk in a wine glass. One thing doesn't go with the other, okay? So your form, your glass, wants to fit the content, yes? And so that's how plays work well together. The content is the script. That is going to be written on the page you have in front of you. The form, the glass you're going to decide is the set, the costumes, the things that you're going to mask or drape the set, the content in. Yes? And then the third thing you have to work with. So you have the script, you have the design, and then obviously you have the actors. Yes? And so again, that's the quality of the wine, the quality of the scotch, right? There's not to talk too blatantly, but for those of you who are scotch drinkers, a 12-year-old single malt is just going to be a better scotch than a J&B, right? Sometimes, which is a blended scotch. Sometimes you can do stuff like add Coca-Cola to it, add a little comedy to it, to make it less painful as a drama, right? To make it more palatable, right, in our drinking analysis, right? But to put Coke in a 12-year-old scotch is horrendous, horrifying. You don't ruin it that way. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. But it doesn't. People learn to drink scotch. Anyway, so you have the director. The director has the script, which is the information. He has the content. You have the designs, which again you work with and collaborate with other designers, which is how you're going to shape the space, how you're going to shape the figures of the costumes, the actors, etc. And then you have the actors, the gesture. Again, I'm going to talk. We talked about Marissa Tomei a little bit ago. I'm talking about Meryl Streep. One of the things that makes Meryl Streep a great actress is that any role that she has, her gesture is completely different. The way she holds herself and the way that she reacts, the way she uses her hands, the way she takes off glasses, the way she will look at other characters is different, right? Devil Wears Prada is completely different than The Bridges of Madison County. You've got one of the richest of the rich and one of the poorest of the poor, and she plays them both impeccably, right? She has the dialogue, the dialect, right? And the physical gesture that she has obviously done a lot of work on as to how these people live and the way they communicate, right? And so again, those are the things you have to work with, yes. Characteristics of a good director. First of all, they assume total responsibility. Keep it cool, don't lose your cool. If anybody that loses an argument, but occasionally, it can be a very powerful tool, but only if you do it in sparse pieces. If you're mad every day, it has no effect, right? If you're always mad, the fact you're mad, no big deal. But if you're typically a very cool-headed, very calm, you should have an organized plan. Be organized is number 7 on the list, but that's all right, I got there early. Number 3, you should value and respect other artists. You should listen. Just because you may have an answer doesn't mean somebody else hasn't thought of something that might be a better answer. Let them try it. Great, let's see. Now, if it's 5 minutes before you open, you know what? Next time we do this play, bring that in. But if you're 3 weeks before you open, let's see how this works. What if we switch characters or did it laying on our stomachs or whatever? I don't know. Try it. Who knows? I don't know. It might work. Think ahead. Plan. One of the things we're going to talk about next class period is how you go about planning for the production. Yes, plan ahead. Now, there's always going to be the inevitable things you didn't plan for, but the better you plan ahead, the more you can deal with the things that you hadn't planned to deal with because there's room and there's time. So if you've already got the play off book and already got things, and the fact you've lost a cast member is much easier to deal with because everything else is right and is in place. And trust me, you lose cast members. Things happen. People are in car wrecks. People jump off ropes and break their legs, right? People get sick, right? And so plan ahead. You never know what's coming around. Be considerate, be kind, maintain a positive attitude. This is going great, guys, keep going. Do your best, yes? Encouragement, yes? All right, I'm gonna quickly go through the 6, another thing that you should have knowledge base in your packet of tools are the 6 elements according to Aristotle of the theater, okay? First of all, just to list the elements, there's you've got the plot, you've got the characters, you've got the theme of the play, you have the diction of the play, you have the spectacle of the play, and you have the music of the play. According to Aristotle, those are the 6 elements of the drama. The plot, again, just to have a quick understanding of all this sort of stuff, there are 4 parts of the plot. There's exposition, which is where you learn what's what, who's who. There's the rising action, which begins at the point of conflict. Once you have determined where the transition from exposition to rising action is, that moment is the point of attack and will tell you what the conflict is. It's the introduction of the conflict. Yes? Now, some plays, the exposition is very short. Some plays, the exposition is half the play, 3/4 of the play. There's a movie, I See Dead People, what is it?
Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense, thank you very much. Which the exposition is all the way until she drops her wedding ring, which if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. That moment is the point where you realize in this play, or in the movie, that things aren't what you thought they were. That's the point of attack. So sometimes it can be 3/4 of the way through the movie or through the play, yes? But that works best in a mystery, because then the point is, what's going on? Who did it? What are we watching? But in a regular play, if you keep the exposition that far, that's kind of rough. The moment of reversal is the climax of the play, and then anything after the climax is what's called the denouement, just because it's French, the falling action, right? You always want to have a little bit of time for the audience to take a breath after you've, shown them the result, right? It's the point where Clouseau tells you all about the red herrings and things like that in the play, right? The cigarette, right? Just for those of us who are into that sort of metaphor. The second aspect, characters. There are 4 aspects of character according to Aristotle. There's the physical aspects, how tall they are, what sex they are, size of their shoes, right? Color of their hair, etc. The social aspects. Excuse me. I'm a professor, you're a student. Our relationship would be different if you were a teller at a bank and I was a customer, for instance. That puts us, even though we're the same exact people, we would be in a different situation, yes. The psychological nature of the character. There are people who just are happy, and there are people that are just sad, Eeyores, etc. And then, of course, the mental aspects, how smart they are. Plays don't tend to be about people who are smart, handsome, kings, and physically perfect. Plays tend to be about people who are failing in one aspect or the other, and how interesting that is. Forrest Gump, physically fine, right? Socially, he's okay. He's not the worst of the worst, right? Psychologically, happy, mentally deficient. How does this guy survive in the world, right? And so again, there typically is some sort of character flaw, right? And that becomes the tragic part of the play, if you're in tragedy. The theme of the play, there are typically 3 types of theme. There's comedy, tragedy, and melodrama. You have to know what type of play you're doing. If you're doing a comedy, the rhythm, the paces in a comedy are just different than the rhythms and paces in a drama, right? I would say in a drama, you have to earn your pauses. If you as a director can learn one thing, it's keep the rhythm, pace quick, so that you can alter that rhythm by earning pauses, because the audience will listen. If you've been quick and fast and fastidious, and suddenly you stop and make the audience listen at the point that is most important in a drama, you have to earn that pause. Same thing with comedy. Comedy, oh my God, is so much harder than drama. 2 reasons. A, most times you have to have a sense of humor. You have to know what's funny and why it's funny. But even then, if somebody sneezes or somebody moves in their chair or a phone goes off, in a drama, you can still get the empathy through watching the character. In a comedy, it's usually the pace, it's the word, right? Do you know how much Santa's sleigh costs? Nothing. It was on the house. How's that? It also helps to lean in on the punchline. Lessons about comedy, yes? So hopefully that's funny. Again, it may not be Christmas when you're talking, but it is here. Melodrama, again, it's a temporarily serious situation, so you may have just as serious a situation as in a tragedy. You may have just a comedic experience, but it's a temporary. It's just really the biggest difference in a melodrama, nobody changes. In a tragedy, somebody's going to change. Somebody's going to be alive at the beginning and dead at the end. In a comedy, somebody is going to come to some sort of realization. The difference between a comedy and a melodrama is at the end of a melodrama, it's just the next day. But nobody has definitely necessarily been altered by the experience of going through the play. That's the easiest way I can understand I can tell you the difference between a melodrama, which is temporarily serious. If you have a car wreck one day, trust me, your day becomes about a car wreck. But is your life tragic? Not unless your mother and your father died in the car wreck. Does that make sense? So it can become tragic, but if you haven't changed through the course of the car wreck, the next day you wake up and you're just like, man, I hope I don't have a car wreck today. That's a melodrama. But if the next day you can't live because you've lost your spouse, that becomes a tragedy. Same experience, right? And so again, in tragedies and comedies, people change. In melodramas, the day is just the same as the next day. The diction of the play is the ability for a play to teach language or to teach lessons about life, right? One of the things is it's often easier to experience, to have an emotional connection with people and watch them go through hell than to have you go through hell, right? That's just one of the things about plays. The music is the sound of the play. Again, it helps to support the movement and the action and the thought of the play. Same thing with the spectacle. The spectacle is the costumes and the sets. They should all be there. Now again, if you don't have content, if you don't have the characters and the other things, the play can be about spectacle. You go to Six Flags, it's about blowing up the car. Okay, so it can be about spectacle, but you have to understand that all the other stuff is not as important as blowing the thing up. If you go to Six Flags to go see the car chases and the car doesn't blow up at the end, you're gonna be upset because the dialogue ain't much, right? All right, so those are, according to Aristotle, the 6 elements. Again, as directors, you need to understand that those are ways of interpreting the play or where the focus of the play can be. As perception is your job to focus on what the story is and how you're telling it. All right, for next time, we just need to have read Crimes of the Heart. We're going to start analyzing it and going through it scene by scene. We'll see you then.